And they fall over, nothing, they don't get this much.
Okay, it's Smart Florida Homes. Stephen? Okay. I want to make sure I give you your props. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to thank Stephen from Smart Florida Homes for hosting us here today.
All right, Stephen.
And this is really a new product from B2B Business Team. And B2B Business Team is we're a very small group of very highly skilled entrepreneurs that each have their own vertical within the business community. Like, we service the business community from anywhere from, well, you'll hear from these guys, but wealth management, staffing, HR, sales. Who else is here from B2B? Accounting and CPA services, leadership development, marketing. So we have a host of services just for the business community within our group. So we've invited you all here because tonight we are building teams that scale your business. It's a leadership conversation on high growth companies, because it's all about getting out of the owner's trap. We all know what that owner's trap is, right? We're doing everything. And so the two gentlemen here tonight, which you have all probably met and spoken to, they are going to talk about building a leadership team and operating system that doesn't depend on you for every single decision, and creating a business that's actually scalable and saleable. We want businesses that are scalable and saleable, right? So I am proud and very honored to introduce them. My name is Alicia Curry. I am the founder and CEO of Audacious Concepts, Inc., and we are, so we are a boutique advisory firm that helps organizations remove the gap between strategy and execution by minimizing friction and aligning those people performances with operational systems. So when we want to know what your people are doing, does it align to the operations that have actual real results for you? That's what we do. We help them do that. So I am going to introduce first Frank Saragosi. He's the founder and CEO of Focus Forward Management. Frank is a certified EOS implementer and a certified exit planning advisor who works with family business owners to build stronger, more valuable businesses so they have real options. They can sell, they can step back, or they can grow. So he is here to share with you some of those strategies tonight. And what makes Frank especially valuable and why he can speak to this is because he blends real operator experience with proven frameworks. Frank brings 30 years of strategy, team building, and execution, including leadership roles at Cartier, Tiffany & Company, and Pandora in Mexico. He translates all of that into practical systems that create clarity, accountability, and traction. Frank is also going to share what high growth companies do differently to build leadership teams that can run businesses so the owner can finally get out of the weeds and increase their enterprise's value. I'll also say that Frank he comes from a family business and now is in a family business. So if you have family businesses, he's also an expert in family businesses. Joining Frank tonight will be Leo Popick. He's the founder and CEO of Leading Peers, and Leo works with growth stage CEOs to strengthen decision-making, accountability, team dynamics, and strategy clarity. He's advised over 120 CEOs himself while building a leading Florida-based CEO peer community. Leo brings a rare combination of perspective. He's built multiple multi-million-dollar businesses, companies across industries and continents. Yeah, we've talked about that, all over the world. And he's deeply focused on the core truth for scaling leaders. You don't have to lead alone. That's the core truth. You don't have to lead alone. I think Sebastian and I were talking about that, as an owner and leader of your own business, you don't have to cry in your milk by yourself. So, really, Leo talks about in his community how the right peer community and cadence of accountability can accelerate performance, reduce blind spots, and help CEOs make better decisions faster. And in this world of AI and everything's moving so fast, it's really important to understand how you can make better decisions faster. So, this afternoon, we're gonna have 2 complementary angles. Let me open up my paper. How to build the internal operating engine of your company to position you for a successful exit, and how to surround yourself with a peer accountability group that keeps you sharp as you scale. So join me in welcoming Frank Zaragosi and Leo Thompson.
Thank you, Alicia. So we will start. We'll place the formats will be 4 questions, 4 ideas. And then we'll take turns talking about a little bit of context, a little bit of stories, and some takeaways. And then at the end, we'll ask you any question that you have. We'd like this to be interactive, so please, you all have experience in these situations. Please bring them up. So the first idea we're going to share is clarity of direction. Clarity of direction as a CEO. We have to have a vision. With that vision, we have to communicate in such a way that it is enticing for everybody, stakeholders, employees, vendors, customers, to follow us. So Leo, give us a little bit of ideas, clarity and direction.
Thanks, Frank. Well, great to be with you all, and I want to start by, in full disclosure and transparency, Frank's my good friend. So if you came here for a boxing match, you're not going to get one. So honored to share the stage with you, Frank. And the second thing is we want this to be highly interactive. This is a new series by B2B, and we want it to be really to add value. So if you leave here with something of value, we've done our job, right? We're not here just to get promoted. In fact, what I want to talk about is what CEOs that grow fast-growing companies on a sustainable basis do well. What do they get right that other CEOs don't? And it's based on my experiences. As Alicia said, I've advised 120 plus CEOs. Many of them are sitting here today, right now, and I've learned a lot from their experience, and I grow with them every single day. And one of the things that is absolutely crucial, so when we put this together with Frank and discuss what the CEOs that scale successfully get right, one of those things is no doubt they get the vision right. And when I mean they get the vision right, what I mean is that not only they see it, but they are able to articulate it, document it, and share it with their team. It's the whole thing. Otherwise, it doesn't scale. So the first part is being able to come up with that vision, which means that they have to perceive themselves as the chief visionary officer, the CVO of the company. And you never delegate that to anybody on your team as CEO. That is your mandate, your first mandate. Nobody's gonna come and follow if they don't know what the direction is. And you always start with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey says in The First Habit of Highly Effective People, or the second one, I forgot which one it was, I think the second. But it's crucial. The first one's being proactive, right? So, and you have to be proactive to get yourself out to think of the vision. But it's absolutely crucial to have an exercise, an ongoing exercise of where are we gonna be in 3 years? And where are we gonna be a year from now? If you're not doing that on a constant basis, the business has no sense of direction, period. There's no way you're gonna line anybody behind anything if you don't know. And I'm saying something pretty obvious, but I'm going to tell 3 short stories and then turn it over to Frank to tell one of his own, or maybe chime in with your thoughts about these stories. I'm going to start with a personal story. So 28 years almost ago, I had a company with a partner. We were 50-50 in the business. And the business did really, really well. And we were a tour company and then evolved into a travel company. And we both enjoyed that aspect until it got to a point where we had a difference of where we wanted to take the company next. I wanted to bring that same company success receiving travelers into a certain destination to a bunch of other countries, a bunch of other destinations. I wanted to expand geographically. My partner wanted to get a venue and take the tourists that were coming into this destination to that venue. And the venue was going to be significant. I mean, it was going to be a pretty big investment. And so we dealt with these venues all the time. We had a variety of different venues that we would bring people to, and he really dreamt of that. He did a master's in real estate. That was his thing, right? And we started to have disagreements on where we were going to go next. Make long story short, we decided to go our separate ways. And my company, which at that point had just reached 7 digits with him, went on to become an 8-digit revenue company 5 or 6 years later. And his company went on to thrive. He's got one of the most amazing venues, and he's doing exceptionally well. But had we stayed together without that clear vision, we would have not achieved the things that we achieved. And so when you have a partner or when you don't know exactly where you're going, there is no way it's going to happen. Tell you a different story from a business broker. And by the way, all the stories I'm going to tell today, with the exception of that one, which was personal, are going to be about other people, and none of them are people that I currently advise. None of them are currently in a peer board that I run. I want to make sure these people feel very protected. So there are people I worked with in the past, and there's absolutely, if you make out who they are, it's incredible. So a person in the business brokerage space that I advised, he came in and he had all this energy, all this drive. It was incredible, the force of will of this individual. But his idea was he wanted to create this platform that people that wanted to buy companies or sell companies would just put them in there, kind of like the Amazon of businesses, right? A marketplace. And people have tried that and so on, and he put all this money into hiring this team that was an outsourced software developer to build that thing. And that was his whole entire team because he was paying a bunch of developers to create this thing. Well, in working with him about this vision, it became pretty clear that he had absolutely no clue if anybody wanted to buy a business that they would just find online or sell a business just putting it out there online. And in pushing him to really come to terms with what would you do if you were selling your business? Wouldn't you want to know who is leaving it to somebody else? Wouldn't you want to meet the person? Wouldn't you want, this is your baby, you led it for years, it's probably the biggest part of your wealth, maybe 80% of your wealth, I've learned from Frank, of a typical business owner comes from their business, the asset that you want to put that online and have it sold like it's, I don't know, like at eBay, it's really not a great idea. And he was able to see that, and to his credit, he pivoted entirely to picking an industry, sticking with that industry, and his company, which was doing about $500,000 of revenue at the time, is now doing $3 million on an ongoing basis and growing, and he gets to take most of that money home. And so it was him completely changing the vision to one that aligned much better with the market and also with where he could thrive. He picked an industry where he could thrive. Third story I'll tell about Clarity comes from somebody that I came into right after they went through a period of complete lack of clarity about their strategy. At the time, they had had a lot of success going from one thing to another in the yacht space. So they kept feeling like the bigger the challenge, the better, and they decided to go from managing yachts and marinas to acquiring a shipyard. And this shipyard was like tens of millions of dollars. And they were getting into something completely different. It's fixing ships, and it was big boats and whatnot. And in the process of doing that, they lost a tremendous amount of money. They went back to the drawing board and said, what are we great at? What do we know how to do? And they were great at marina management. And they stuck to that, but created a plan for growth. And now we're in the process of acquiring marinas and expanding. The company went from about 4 million in revenue when I met them to about 20 million in revenue a year right now. So it shows you how important it is to have that clarity of direction in the vision. CEOs that scale their companies do this well. It doesn't mean that the vision doesn't change. Of course it changes. Of course it changes. You have to have a plan to go to war, and then you change your plan constantly once you see what. But if you're failing to plan, you're planning to fail. That's known. You have to plan again and again and again, and you have to iterate quicker and quicker all the time because the world's changing more quickly all the time. Technology is speeding up, geopolitical events are speeding up, markets are being disrupted quicker. So you have to have an exercise of where do I see ourselves 3 years from now, where do I see ourselves a year from now, and you have to have some type of exercise that makes you rethink things on an ongoing basis. Whether it's monthly, whether it's weekly, you have to have that. It has to be structured into what you do.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm going to touch on how do we actually bring that vision into something that is more concrete. Because at the end of the day, vision is not only about where you want to go, that's part of it, but it's also understanding who we are, right? We all have a certain set of core values that we influence and we attract the right people, but we also hopefully repel the wrong people. Personal story, I work for, as Elisa said, the 3 big jewelry companies. All of them were absolutely different in culture. And you have to understand what yours is. So as long as you have, so vision is not only about where you're going, but it's also knowing who you are, what you do really well, where you're going, of course, and then how are you going to get there. So it's bringing those elements into a document that is easy to communicate to everybody else, because if it stays in your mind, or if it stays at your leadership level, that's great, but you need to bring it down to everybody else. So practical tip, create your vision on 2 pages that's easy to communicate. EOS does a very good job with VTO to do that. But basically, your vision is important. That's what's going to carry your whole team forward. So, practical tip: think about vision not only about where you're going, but also all the other parts of it: who you are, what you do, how you're going to get there, etc.
Awesome. So we're going to keep it moving to the second question. So that way we get to the open question part for all of you. Second question, I'm going to bring it up for Frank, is how do you remove founder dependency, right? Once you have a vision, we need to get beyond the founder doing all the work, right? Every startup pretty much starts with the founder doing everything, having all the hats from chief bottle washer all the way up to CEO. At different points, the founder's got to let go of different things. How do you get past founder dependency?
We all have our own companies. We started, some of us did, and we understand that there's a term called evolution, revolution. Evolution is a point where you grow, you start your own, you have an idea, you go out, you market it, you sell it, you do your accounts receivables, it's working great, you get more clients, you hit a ceiling, you get a point where you can't do it all. Just physically, there's not enough hours in the day. And that's where you go through a revolution period. And you have 3 options there. You're either going to break through that ceiling, you're going to stagnate, or you're going to drop, right? All companies go through that. Personal experience, Pandora at the time was a $1 billion company, went through 5 CEOs in 4 years. Perfect example of how you hit a ceiling, and until you break through, you're not going to get another level of evolution, right? And that happens at all levels.
Did you feel that those were mistakes in hires, or were they part of the level of the business that needed to change out?
So that is a great question. And in public companies, you don't have long. You have 3-4 quarters. If you don't show results in 3-4 quarters, you get the boot, right? They change the CEO. In a private company, you have the luxury of having more time. The outcome is going to be the same thing. You don't have the pressure of having shareholders holding you accountable, but if you don't break through, you're going to have the same results. All the bad hires I think that a great CEO has the ability to see beyond the horizon. Right now, we're going through a period of high technology innovation, disruption. And why do the CEOs get paid a lot of money? It's because they can see over the horizon. They see how do they steer their ship to avoid the rocks and to still be relevant a year from now, right? So is it a bad hire? I think that it's that they maybe lack vision, and ultimately, CEOs are not hired to continue on a path. They're there to really trailblaze, right? They have to create something new. Otherwise, the old guy would have done that. So I'm not sure it's a bad hire. I think it's a lack of vision. Maybe that translates to bad hire. But certainly from a business perspective, we see this a lot with owners that don't. And by the way, lifestyle businesses, that's what happens, right? You have a lifestyle business, you grow to a point where you're comfortable. You don't want to really hire people, train them, think about the next evolution, iteration of your business. So you stay lifestyle, and that's fine. Makes it a little bit difficult to hire high performers because they want to grow. And if you don't have that vision, they're not going to stick around for too long. And that's what you do, actually, right? So a story here about a founder dependency. Had this one person, first time I met him in a Starbucks, and was saying he was doing it all. He was doing the sales, the operation, and the finance, and he wanted to grow. He understood that he needed to bring on a team. So the question now becomes, what part of his business is he going to let go first? And that takes a mental change, because once you have the clarity of where you're sitting in your organization, now you can say, which of these seats do I like more or less? The ones that you like less, that's the one you're going to find your replacement for. So going through that exercise is really important. If you don't do it, you're going to get stuck, you're going to get frustrated, and you're not going to grow. Owner dependency, if you want to have any chance of transferring your business, whether it be having a better life, if you're spending 50, 60 hours in your business, or if you haven't gone on vacation for a long time without being tethered to your phone, you probably have an owner dependency issue, and it makes sense to think about how you're going to get less dependent in your business. But that's what happens. If you don't do that, you're going to have problems attracting people, and you're going to stay frustrated unless you want a lifestyle business.
Can I
So-
ask a question? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, ladies first.
I was going to ask, because you said CEOs have to be those visionaries in the company. Is that something you can train somebody to start kind of seeing, or is that innate in some people?
So, yeah. So most CEOs that I know had that ability to
Innate.
think beyond. Right? They're innovators. The reason why they're not innovating is probably because they're owner dependent. They're stuck. They're doing everything. They can't get out of. When you're firefighting, you don't have time to think strategy. You're constantly in the weeds, and if you're stuck in the weeds, it's very difficult to see. There's a saying that says you can't read the label if you're inside the bottle. Right? You've heard that maybe, but that's very true, right? If you're inside the bottle and you're fighting the fires on a daily basis, you can't see the big picture.
So when you have CEOs that occupy, say, 4 or 5 seats, and say they love 2 or 3 of them, how do you coach them into understanding that the ideal role is to be in one seat, which is the CEO seat, and pull them out of maybe parts of the business that they love doing, but it still takes away from their ability to strategize?
Great question. I have this story of the CEO who was the best salesperson, which is often the case, right? The CEO knows their product, knows their vision, they can sell to anybody. But they were also in they were doing program development. She was also involved in the program development. And it's the way she got disassociated from that is by actually having a person that was doing the day-to-day. And when she was able to disassociate herself from doing the day-to-day, she was able to actually have those big relationships with the other CEOs that enabled her to unlock a major contract. And that was the click. That was a moment that enabled her to think, wow, I'm not doing the day-to-day, I have people doing that, and now I can look for the big contracts, right? So it's really painting, they typically have that vision, they're just stuck in the weeds and they've lost that vision. So by being able to unlock that, releases their ideas.
Yeah, I'll add a quick story. I met a gentleman who I was advising for a while, and he was not able to overcome this thing. He was doing everything, wasn't able to build a team, thought he was a really good business person, but really didn't have absolutely anybody on the team. Was working until like 9 p.m. every single night, weekends were a continuation of work in the construction space. And what I've encountered over time is that part of it is what Frank said, that they're so busy that they don't come up with a vision. So it goes back to the first problem. A big part of it is that they don't want to bring people into the business, because let's face it, when you bring people into the business, you have a responsibility you didn't before. You now have payroll, you have higher expenses, you've got people issues that you didn't have before when it was just you. So going over that threshold of, okay, let's acquire these people or this individual, then a team, is actually painful. It's painful, and it's at the same time absolutely necessary to have a company that scales. So that's where the dichotomy is. The paradox is right there. It's like delegation. You're always going to be able to do something quicker than delegating it to somebody else for the first time. But if you never delegate it and train the person, you're going to be stuck doing that thing forever. So there is a right balance. You can't hire everybody at once. You can't delegate everything all day. There are some things that you say, if this is 2 minutes for me to do, I'll just do it myself, right? Well, the same applies to hiring. If you can only take on one new person, you've got to think, okay, like Frank said, what's that first hire? What's the area that I need it to be? There's two very different approaches to how you grow the company. One is, if you find somebody you like, you have the right culture, the right talent, bring them in, and then we'll figure out where they go. A very different approach is, you look at your org chart. Your org chart shows you where you need people. You think through, where do I want to be and where do I need somebody to come in? And that's a more analytical approach. Whether you take the right side of the brain, just bring them in and we'll figure it out, or left side of the brain, you have to think in terms of, how do I grow a team to be able to scale? Obviously, if you have all the cash in the world, you can afford the first alternative of just hiring people that you think are great and then seeing how do we end up organizing this. If you have to be more measured, you're bootstrapping it, you have to think much more carefully about which role do I want to prioritize and hire for. So typically in leading peers, I see a lot more people take this second approach of figuring out exactly what seat they're looking to fill, create the job description, understand what they're looking, or what would be success in that role, and then say, all right, it's so compelling, it's so clear that I need to take this next step. But most certainly, this is a key component to be able to grow anything.
So key takeaway idea is actually E-Myth. You may know the book. He talks about, and Traction as well, he talks about actually creating your accountability chart. Create your organizational chart and seeing how many seats you sit. And think
See
of
how
it-
many what?
Seats you sit. Seats, like functions, right? By doing that, you enable yourself to actually remove a great idea, a great best practice. Actually, consider it you're a consultant. You're not part of your business. You're fired from your business. You're just looking at your business from the outside. How would you structure this business? And if you go through that exercise, you will very clearly take some work, clearly see of what would be the functions that you would have first. Then put the names of the people in your organization that fill those seats currently, and you'll notice in the owner dependency that they're probably sitting in 2 or 3 of those seats, right? That's your first exercise. Do that, you'll have clarity. The clarity will be, oh my gosh, I'm doing this. That's why I'm frustrated. Yeah.
Question, guys.
Yeah.
So a lot of companies want to grow, they understand the need to grow, they have pain, they're unwilling to put the expense forward. So what's the metric, whether it's EBITDA or sales, that says, okay, once you get to that point, now you can bring on a part-time, a full-time, because there's obviously gonna be a step back in net profit
Yeah.
before you take your 2 steps forward.
Yeah.
So what does that metric look like?
There's, in my opinion, there's no formula, right? And I wish there was, because I'd come in and say, here's the, it's 40% of this or 20% of that. It varies on a lot of levels. Your risk tolerance, or the risk tolerance of the CEO, whether they are the breadwinner in the house or somebody else is, influences that to a large degree. How stable the business is. Are you starting each month having to come up with all the projects you're going to sell, or do you have a recurring revenue? But one thing I would say is this. I always counsel to get a fractional person that's top level, and this, we have to segue into the third question because it's 5 o'clock, which is creating an A-level team is the third big thing. Once you remove the founder bottleneck, it's how do I create an A-level team? And in my experience, the key concept is if you can't afford an A-level person full-time, hire a fractional person that's A-level. Do not delegate the running of a department or the running of a unit of your company to somebody who doesn't have the strategic capability to lead it. If you have somebody who's just committed and works hard, a good pencil pusher, that person might be phenomenal to keep on the team and to grow them over time. They might be a top producer in sales. They might be great at doing social media posts. They might be fantastic about providing the service. But if they don't have the ability to be developed to sit in your C-suite or to be a division president at some point in their life, you have to realize that you are occupying that role right now. You are the division president, you are the C-suite of it, you are the CMO, CSO, COO, CTO, all of the C's, because that person's not going to be there. So in the area that your company is most dependent on, that you are not great at, you've got to bring in a fractional person to become part of your team. Because if some key aspect of your business is not being led by somebody with A caliber and who has strategic level capability, the business cannot scale. If any critical department, whether it's marketing or sales or operations, or in some businesses it might be technology, is being run by somebody who's not top level, the business cannot scale, because the CEO typically is not great at any other seat but the CEO seat. They might be good at some type of low-level work because that's how they started. At some point they were working in something and then they decided I'm going to have my own company. So a lawyer might be good doing legal work. Construction person might be good at actually going to a construction site. But they're probably not going to be good at heading sales, heading marketing, heading technology, heading all the departments of the company or units. So that's where you are much better off bringing in a consultant or a fractional person that can lead well. And I have 2 quick stories to tell on how to build an A-level team.
Hold on, can I,
Yeah,
before
sure.
you go there, can I just add one specific about EBITDA? Is that companies go through different times for scaling. Scaling requires investments, and that's automatically going to take down your EBITDA, right? So if you're scaling for growth, you need to invest in it. Your EBITDA is going to be affected. Once you're thinking about transitioning and thinking, that's where you have to bring up your EBITDA, right? So there's different time for different things. Exit's going to be typically a multiple of EBITDA, so you want to get your EBITDA up there, and you probably won't invest as much in your people, in new technology, in whatever initiatives that you have. So just, when we're in growth phase, you're going to eat up your EBITDA because that's where you have to invest to get to the next level of growth.
I got a quick
Yeah.
question for Frank on that topic of bringing in someone, because you're a family business. A lot of people just bring in their husband or their wife or their kid or somebody. What are the pros and cons of doing that?
That's such a loaded question.
Leave the room now.
I'll take it.
That's okay.
Yeah.
There's a great model called the Family Circle, developed by MIT professor John Davis, and he has 3 different circles. And the circle number 1 is going to be your family. You're going to have it's a Venn diagram actually. So you have your family, you have your shareholders, investors, and you're going to have your business. And that Venn overlay creates 7 different positions, right? You can be an owner working the business. and a family member or not, right? You have those variations. And ultimately, I think what happens is that when we think about, and by the way, each of them have different objectives. If you're family, you look at the family circle, you want harmony, you want legacy, right? If you're an investor, you want to have return on investment with low risk, right? Think about your portfolio. And if you're in the business, you want to have high growth, high profit, right? Sometimes those are in opposition. If you're in a heavily capital-intensive business, you need to invest in a new piece of machinery that may if you're a shareholder, you probably don't want that. You may not want that, right? But if you want the growth, so you have to understand where you put what cap you're wearing at the time you're making a business decision, because everything you make from a business perspective should be with that cap on, right? So how do you make that? Carefully. You make that decision carefully. My personal experience, I come from a family business, right? Dad gave me a phone call after my MBA, come back to a family business. I went there, and I knew I had no idea what I was going to do, right? So my lesson is create the responsibilities first. Have them sit in an accountability chart and have that defined clearly so that you know what the expectations are and they know what the expectations are. And hopefully it works out, because if not, you're going to have to make a decision, right?
Alicia, I'll tell you a quick story. I'll tell you guys, somebody that I used to advise, property management company, successful to some degree, and the CEO had his wife do all of the financial reporting. And he was just not happy with how she was doing this. And he just couldn't tell her that he didn't want her to continue doing that because he didn't want to hurt her feelings.
You bring in a consultant.
Right. The financial part of property management is absolutely crucial. You have to show your clients what their numbers look like. Each HOA has to see their numbers. And this was clearly hurting the business. He solved it by actually not investing much in the business and going off and doing other things. So that's how he solved for it. But ultimately, it meant that that business couldn't scale. So he just went off and acquired business partners to do other things so he could tell her, well, we don't need this, we don't need that, my partner this, my partner that. Was it creative? Was it creative? Was it a cop-out? I'm not here to say, but
they're still married.
They're still married.
Right to see.
But you know what, Larry, that's what you're saying is really important, because everybody wants it.
Yeah.
We start from the premise that everybody wants to be successful, right?
Yeah.
Our kids want to be successful, our parents want to be successful, we want to be successful. So it's really just a matter of having that honest conversation and putting them in a box, in a place that makes them successful. Once you have that conversation, typically that brings down, that's illuminating, but in family businesses, family dynamics, that's a tough conversation that typically an outsider has to have, because it's tough to do when you're inside the leg of the bottle, right? I mean, there's just too many emotions that are tied to it.
Well, one of the restricting factors to building an A-level team is the level of emotional intelligence of the leader. You can only lead A-level people if you're a person with high level of emotional intelligence, and we're not born with that. That's something that all of us have to develop over time. Whoever tells me that a baby is innately gifted with emotional intelligence, I would consider it to be a lunatic, because we all know how difficult it is to learn our own emotions, let alone understand other people's. It's something that you never stop evolving in this area, but there's no way to lead competent people unless those people feel like they want to be led by you. And that search for personal development, for growth as a leader, is one of the stumbling blocks of companies that don't scale. And I'll tell a quick other story regarding creating a team of A-level players. So one of the persons I advised was, she was a business owner in the medical products resale space, and she had a $12 million or so revenue company a year, had a business partner. The business partner, after many, many years of being together, started going deeper in his drinking addiction. things in his life started to unravel in a very negative direction. His emotional intelligence went down, his drive went down, his commitment to the company, his integrity went down as a consequence of how much he was drinking. And obviously it affected the whole organization. But she couldn't fire him. They were 50-50 partners. And so we see this a lot in 50-50 partnerships when there's a problem with one of the two individuals, that it's really hard to part ways. I'm not saying, I've had them. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be had. I'm just saying that this is one of the problems, because you can't just fire that person that's not an A-level player. And so this person was still the CFO of the company and in charge of operations. So how do you deal with that? And ultimately, the only way the business could scale was finding a way for that person to leave the business. So as painful as it was, and this was a process that took months, actually a year or two, eventually she did. And when that happened, the business went from being a $12 million a year revenue business to an $18 million revenue. But more importantly, she regained her happiness and joy in the business. So this is a critical point of, you gotta love your team, and whenever you are the CEO, you've gotta figure out the way to be able to work in a team that you love. If you've got partners, it makes it critical to decide who those are and how you're gonna make sure that you're always gonna love working together, right? And that has to be built into the agreement. If you don't have partners and you have leeway to build your team, it's better to pick slowly if cash is a problem to scale, and the one person at a time, and to be able to sustain them over time. To say, oh, I had a good month, I'm gonna hire, if the next month you're gonna have to fire, does not build scalability. So you always have to think in terms of, it's gonna take me 6 to 12 months for this person to become a strong contributing member of the team. If I can't sustain them, I'm not ready for this incorporation.
Yes, building your A-level team is really probably the most important thing that you can touch on. Story, manufacturer, family business. Again, these are clients that are from past, and we started with 8 people in the room leadership team, and after a year of going through this process of understanding who we really need, only 2 of them stayed, and it was a churn in the leadership team, and that's what's sometimes unfortunately necessary in order to find your A-level people. Once you find your A-level people, it's liberating. It's liberating for the CEO, because now they know that they have the right people sitting in a functional seats, and that's the only way to grow. Good to great book. I would recommend it for anybody. Jim Collins talks about having the right people on the bus, but he also has in parentheses getting the wrong people off the bus. Right? You have to.
So Frank, can you talk a little bit more about 8 to 2 people over a course? I mean, what happened?
When you have your accountability chart, and when you understand what you expect from those roles, and you put that against the people that you currently have, it becomes pretty clear if they're the right people or not. Because accountability is the first thing that drops, right? And once you shine that spotlight, those, call them less than A players, right? They don't want to be there. Typically, they self-select. Typically, they move out after a certain amount of time. They move on and say, you know what, this is not my happy space anymore. And it's amazing how that has to do with accountability. A lot of the people that are on the executive suite, as you grow, there's a lot of, we know about legacy IT systems, but there's such a thing as legacy people. They've been there for so long. You trust them. They've been there for a long, long time. But now, unfortunately, the business has outgrown them, right? So when you start increasing your level of accountability and performance, because you hire one top performer, and it just makes that gap so much more clear between the A players and the C players, right? And those are the ones that typically say, you know what, I'm not happy anymore, and they self-select.
Frank,
So that's what happens.
to add to what you're saying, with Jim Collins' book, Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0, which I highly recommend, I'm reading through it right now, but one of the things that was so impactful for me about this Jim Collins book, and I've read many of his books, is that it says that the single most important KPI of every company is, what is he going to say next, right? And he said, the percentage of your critical seats that are held by the right person. If it exceeds 90%, you've got a great company. If it's below 90%, you don't. That's the threshold. It can never be 100, because there's always going to be somebody you just hired who's new, or who's you're developing, or you just moved into the role, and you might have your doubts, or you're not sure. So 100 is too high of a standard. But if it's not at least 90%, you've got a problem. And he says that's the single most important KPI of every business. After 30, 40 years of being probably the biggest business guru of our time, he came to that conclusion in this 2.0. The original book came out 30 years ago, before Good to Great. And I find that to be true. That's why I agree with Frank. This is the single most important thing. We started with the vision because, of course, you can only attract talent of that level when you are able to articulate the vision. This is where we're going. You don't attract them just saying, this is who I am, do you want to come work here? People are like, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? How's the journey going to be? So we start with that, and with overcoming the founder dependency, so there is that search. But eventually we get to the critical component, which is having at least 90% of those critical seats, not every seat, but the critical ones, which he defines what those are, what he means by critical, with the right people. I find that to be true. And that forces you to be extremely rigorous in the analysis. Because if this is the single most important KPI of your success, you have to give it the time and attention. And that forces you to be rigorous of, do I have the right person here? And he has a series of different questions that you can ask yourself to get to that determination.
So I know that we're running a little bit out of time, so maybe what we ought to do is that we'll skip the last question. And if you have any questions, please bring them up. A few best practices on your vision. Make sure that you include it condensed. It's not only about where you're going, but who you are, what you do, where you're going, how you're going to get there. That's important. Create your accountability chart so that you have clarity in who does what, and that's going to be eye-opening. And then make sure that you have the right people sitting in the right seats. You're on your way.
Does anybody want to ask a question? You gotta go. Yeah, sure.
Enjoy your son's.
Yes.
Yes.
Baseball game.
Thank you so much for coming.
Great to have you.
Thanks.
Does anybody have a question or want to share a leadership challenge? We have 10 more minutes. We're gonna at 5:30 move on to some informal networking. Does anybody want to ask a question about any of these ideas? By the way, the fourth one we were going to talk about is institutionalizing accountability, which is how do you move now that you've got the vision, now that you've outgrown the founder bottleneck, now that you have A-level players and built a solid team, how do you institutionalize accountability? Meaning, how do you measure? How do you have a system to track results and who's responsible for what?
Communication,
and that's, cadence of meeting rhythm and so on and so forth. Does anybody have a challenge right now that they're dealing with?
How many family businesses are here?
Gary,
Thank you.
Lou?
2.
I can give a personal experience though
Yeah.
about a situation that happened with, I'm a financial planner, so I kind of run my own business. About 9 years ago, I needed to make a new hire, someone to run my practice. Sales assistant, practice manager, it could be all really encompassing. And I went through about 5 or 6 interviews and offered the position to 2 people that ultimately didn't stick around. And we changed the design of the ask. And I was working with Indeed, I think, at the time, and one of our consultants that worked for our broker-dealer. And we changed the design of the ask to the person that fit my personality. We weren't really looking for skill set, although certain skills were required. Phone skills, bilingual was a plus, application knowledge, and then Word docs and things like that, spreadsheets. But when we changed it to, I need someone that fits with my personality, now that person became so coachable. And we haven't had a fight in 9 years, 8 years. it's unbelievable how good we get along. But that's changed everything for me. I wasn't hiring for a skill set. Of course, my business is much less complicated in some regards than a lot of other family businesses, but I was hiring for the personality that matched that I knew I could coach. And that made all the difference in the world. We've tripled our productions from that, going back 7 years ago.
So Jeff, I think that what you were looking for was really a right hand, wouldn't you say?
More or less, yeah.
You were the CEO of your company, you were looking for your COO, so to speak. Doesn't matter what title you actually
Sure.
gave that person or the job description said. When a CEO is looking for the right hand, that is the single most important thing, is do we get along? Do we enjoy working together? Do we enjoy spending time together? Because the number of conversations you're gonna have throughout each day is immeasurable. And if each one is producing aggravation, the energy is going to be swapped from you.
It's so true, because the first person I had that worked with me for about 6 months was so capable, like beyond capable, but man, we butt heads almost every day. It was, I couldn't do the work.
You know what's
And so
interesting?
that taught me a lesson.
That's friction.
Yeah.
I would love to hear from Alicia on assessments and personality match tools, especially the PI. I know you're an expert in that. And can I weigh on her, guys, for a
Sure.
quick moment?
Actually, it'd be
Yeah,
really,
go ahead.
really interesting to do that in the concept of you have the CEO, COO, and making sure that there's that synergy that happens.
Right, yeah. And thank you, Marco, because the reason we use multiple tools to measure that type of relationship, because it's beyond just personality, it's also how they take action on things and how you take action on things. So the friction might not have just been on that affective level. So we look at the mind is 3 different parts when we're making decisions and taking action. We have our cognitive, so you're talking about skills. Cognitive is all those skills that they've built, all the things they've learned. They went to law school, they know how to do this, they know how to write a brief, they know, they have those skill sets. And then you want the affect, which is what you were talking about, personality. Do we get along? How is our culture? How do our values match? Those sorts of things. What do they like or dislike? And then there's the conative piece, which we were talking about earlier, that Colby does, which is how do they actually take action and do these things to get results. Now, if your conative, the way your conative design is mismatched to them, there will be that friction that shows up as personality. It will show up as, why does this person resist when I'm asking them to do something? Why can't they just do what I'm telling them to do? Why is it so difficult? That may not be a personality conflict, that may be a conative conflict, because it's so subconscious, you don't even know it's happening. So when we dive into that part of the mind and we can say, okay, this is where your potential for conflict lies. So here are some workarounds, here are some tools. This is how you communicate that. This is how you can bridge that gap. Because it can be worked out, but you just have to recognize it. And when it's not recognized, it becomes so frustrating, and you're absolutely right, it kills productivity. Absolutely kills productivity.
Yeah, you don't want to work with the person.
You don't want to work with
so
it.
you stop all the work
You
that's
just like, I just
any
don't want to
overlap.
talk to you.
Very hard to do.
One of the things that Jim Collins in this book talks about Entrepreneurship 2.0 is that you require 3 things from somebody: values, will, and skills. So Alicia just talked about values and skills, and then this third thing is how they do things. He refers to it more in a different way as will. Do they have the will to get things done? You can have somebody who's got your values, they have the skills to do something, but they're complacent. They don't really want to grow. They don't really want to achieve these results. And I find that that's a very useful lens, because obviously we know that if they don't have the values that you have, you got to show them out the door. They're the wrong people. That's the easy one. If they don't have the skills, it's kind of easy to say, can they get there or not, or can they find a position in the organization that they have the right skills to execute well? But the will is sometimes where I find the biggest mismatch between the CEO owner of a business doing 5 to 20 million and their team. Because there is this assumption by the CEO that the people on their team should somehow have a similar will level than they have, which is the biggest misconception of all time. If you expect your people who are employees of your company to have your same level of will, you are living in some type of planet that is not this one. Because you are the person that created the business, you came up with the vision, you have the total sense of ownership, you own the legal entity, and you're expecting them, who are hired to do a position and can be terminated at your whim, to have that same level of will. And by the way, if they had it, wouldn't they gone off and created something of their own if they were that passionate about having their own organization and feeling that sense of ownership? So I find that a lot of times the problem is the CEO's expectation. They don't build, and so they don't build an organization that makes sense for the people that work there to work there. And so they start to think that everybody else are a bunch of incapable human beings. They start thinking, I've got the wrong people, and it's all the lens, all about the lens through which they're seeing things.
I actually recently consulted with a client who's having this problem with their top earner, who's not an owner. I said, give him a percentage of the business, non-voting shares.
There you go.
Give him skin in the game, hold him accountable, but now he's got something that he can exit with when he gets to his retirement date. And they thought, I have no skill in knowing how to do all that, other than saying, I understand the model,
Yeah.
right? And it seems
Yeah, you
to
can-
have some traction.
That's great. That's a great way to get there. Larry, you had a question.
No, it was really just a personal experience that I had picking up on what you said. I hired a young attorney years ago, and he had the will, he had the skill, he had everything. And ambition, up the kazoo, right? And he just wanted to take over, And it got to the point where if I had to go to see my controller, which was past his office, I walked the other way around just to avoid his door, And finally, one day, my wife said to me, you come home from work, you're not happy anymore. This guy is driving you crazy. Questions, I talked to him, and he was new, and I wanted to give him the time. I wanted to answer all his questions. I wanted to console him if he was worried about something or teach him something. But it became like hours every day.
How'd you solve for that?
I got rid of him.
Right.
I had to. And I found that afterwards that he had a similar problem with 2 other firms. And at the exit interview, I said, you're very capable and very ambitious, and that's great. But you need to have your own firm.
Right.
Okay, because there's no way you're going to be able to work for somebody.
Right. Right.
And I believe he's successful now.
Great advice.
Yeah.
You did him a
You
favor.
It was driving me crazy.
You mentored him.
Yeah.
Adventure.
By the way, we say make him happy elsewhere.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Yeah. I wish him all the luck in the world. I know he's still angry at me, but what can I do?
Ben, you had a question?
Change the direction a little bit. You talked earlier about 80% of a small business owner's wealth is that business. And with the largest transfer of wealth that you're hearing in all the articles coming over the next 5 to 10 years, what are some of the biggest surprises that these business owners are finding when they're getting ready to exit?
Great question. So number one is that we all have to understand that we will transition our businesses, right? We don't live forever. That's just part of life. And the second awareness has to be that would you invest 80% in one stock? You probably never would do that. Yet that's exactly where they are. Their highest risk asset is their business, and it's not marketable. It's not like they can call a broker or go online and sell it, right? They can't do that. So taking the time to really understand, number one, that there has to be a recognition that you will transition. Number two, that you are in a high risk. And number three is, okay, now what am I going to do about it? Transition doesn't happen overnight. You don't have a transition, or you can, you're not going to get the value from your business, right? So it takes time to prepare. Usually it's between 2 to 3 years, right? And that's when you have to build up your team, make sure that you're not owner dependent, make sure that you have your A-level players, make sure that you have your other people, your wealth advisor, your insurance people, your corporate lawyers, your CPAs, right? There's a team of players that have to be involved in actually making sure that you have a good exit and or transition, whatever that may be, right? So a lot of it is education. Then it's really just bringing the owner to the number one, awareness, and number two, knowing that there are options out there.
Yeah. I met somebody last night at another event who just purchased a business. That's the gentleman I introduced you to today. And he bought this business from an owner who was so proud to say, everything's in my head. These people in the organization can't do anything without me. And he got the biggest discount you could imagine by buying the business.
There you go.
And he got the person to agree to stay on to transfer that knowledge over, I guess, a 6-month period. So to me, that's a lose-lose for the owner.
100%.
Yeah, not only did you get the, yeah.
You got a lower value and you're stuck in your business
Exactly.
until
You
you
still gotta work
transition.
for a while. Yeah.
100%. And you know, it's interesting, there's a bell curve that I use in the presentation that takes a gap, a value of a business and puts it against this benchmark against the industry. And depending on their intangibles, which are, you know, culture, the secret sauce of the business, the less owner dependency, the customer, all of those actually diminish their discounts on your value,
Right.
and you end up on the wrong side of that bell curve, right?
Yeah.
So you get a discount, and what people don't understand is that it's all in the eyes of the buyer. You can think that this is the best, beautiful baby of your business, but if no one else wants to buy it,
Yeah.
it's pretty ugly.
Yeah. Well, and with the way private equities gobbling up companies, I mean, they have like clear
100%.
KPIs, and they'll steal your company from you if you
100%.
don't have it.
One of the best ways to become less owner dependent, of course, is to write your SOPs, right? So that anybody can execute those
Yeah.
SOPs. One of the ideas that's most impacted me this year is this idea that everyone in your company is in one of 3 levels. They're either able to follow an SOP, they're able to write an SOP, which is obviously the next level, when they can create the SOP for the organization in a certain area, or they're able to understand the interaction of all the SOPs of the company. That's the system thinking. When you're developing somebody in your organization, typically you don't think about that. You're happy when they can execute what they're supposed to do. Oh, this person does what they have to do, they're autonomous. That's great. That's the first level. If you really want to build a company that scales, you have to think about how many people can I move to the 3rd level? So ask yourself right now, how many people in your organization would you trust to build an SOP? And if the answer is nobody, that's a really good starting place. And the best exercise for that is have them write SOPs and review it with them.
Does it have to be a good one?
It has to be really good. You got to train in that area. You got to train in systems. You got to lift up the level of your people up in systems, in processes.
Yeah.
That's the most inexpensive way to scale a business, because technology costs a lot. I've seen a lot of even mid-sized market firms with. A friend of mine is the CFO of a company with over 100 million, and he says, we're not investing in AI. Everybody says that we're investing in AI. We're not. Because to transition the AI of a firm costs millions of dollars. So, and things are changing so quickly that we don't know which tool to adopt. So we're not investing in AI. And so it costs millions to go through technological adaptations. It's not for everybody. So what can you do? Hiring costs a lot of money. You increase your payroll, giving more incentives, giving better bonuses, it's great, but it costs a lot of money. The single most inexpensive way to do it is to systematize by creating processes. And if you're the only one creating processes in the company's still owner dependent. Because if you are not able to change the processes, nobody else knows how to do it. So it's a skill set that can be taught, because none of us were born writing SOPs, right? And at some point when you establish your business, you said, this is the way we're going to do this. Well, that's your SOP. And if you can document it, and nowadays with LLMs like ChatGPT, you can do it in a second. If you can document it, then that's easy to do. You can just dictate the SOP. So-and-so has to do this, and then it'll write it for you. But how do you translate that into how, first level, then second level, and finally get people in your C-suite that are able to see how all the SOPs of the company come together. Otherwise, the business is in your head.
So Leo, we bought Training,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and the biggest struggle we have with this LMS system is the structure. And two businesses, one Training, we're gonna
You want to
somehow
explain
figure
what
out.
Training is so everybody knows?
Sure, please.
No, do you want to explain?
Yeah,
what
it's a learning management system, an LMS,
Yeah,
that allows you to develop SOPs.
yeah.
And it's got a little AI component, a little video recorder. The hardest part that we struggled with on both companies was the structure of what to document. Wouldn't it have been great, maybe they have something, we haven't figured it out, that takes you through the 15 different parts in a small to medium sized business that you need to document? But we're struggling with that part.
So there's a way to do that, by the way. That's called the 3-step documenter. Number one is that all businesses have core sets of functions, right? We all have an HR. How do we go out, identify what we need, go into the marketplace, get the right candidate, onboard them, train them, manage them, and let them go if it doesn't work, right? You take that from HR, marketing, your sales, a few operations, your delivery of product, then your accounting, right? You have a handful of them. Once you identify what those handfuls are, is force yourself to on 1 to 5 pages, what has to happen? What are the sequential steps that you go through? And if you do the exercise, it forces you to look big picture and not go into the weeds, because we can go into a 750-page SOP very quickly, and that serves no one, right? And once you have that top down, what has to happen, I sort of describe the steps for HR. You can do the same thing in marketing, right? Who's my target market? How do I communicate to them? How do I get them interested? How do I bring them on board? How do I convert them, right? So when you think about the steps that way, it makes it easier to say, okay, this is sequentially what has to happen, and then the who, the what, the where, those are procedures, right? But keep it up top level, 1 to 5 pages. That's step one, is documenting it. Creating that list content. Number 2 is documenting, simplify it. And number 3 is making sure that it's in a place that people, such as Trainio, where you can actually have it as a learning system.
Big picture, there's 2 ways to do SOPs of a company. One is start top down and say, here are the key areas of the company and what are the things that we do right now. And you leave it at a very top level until you finally can become more specific about each of those components. The other way is just that every time something needs to be done and you want it to be done a certain way, you just create the SOP. And as long as the SOPs are being filed in a way that's clear and systematic, it becomes a puzzle that you're completing one piece at a time. So imagine you need to have 1,000 pieces of the puzzle for all 1,000 SOPs that your company needs. As long as you're putting one down that's an important process, you're further ahead in completing the puzzle. And so then when we have another thing we need to do, we do that. And eventually it gets done. Again, it's like I was mentioning earlier, 2 approaches to building your team. Do you start looking at the org chart, or do you just bring in people that are talented and then you figure it out? But at the end of the day, however you get there, and how you get there has more to do with how you think and how important you think this is, and how busy you are. If you're busy, the second approach of one at a time is the more reasonable approach. If you've got more time as a CEO to work on this, then the first approach is always going to be more systematic, because it starts by, what do we need to prioritize? Sales or whatever it may be. Well, let's figure out the SOPs of that, and then we move on to the next thing. But however you do it, it has to be done on an ongoing basis. And the files need to say whether it's Trainio or whether you're putting it on the Google Cloud or SharePoint, version 1, because there's always going to be version 2, there's always going to be version 200.
It's constant.
It's constant.
Yeah. One of the things I do with my teams is actually have the head of the department be responsible for a SOP, and then they bring it down to their teams, because it's not, usually they're not the ones that already are close to the problems, to create the SOPs, and then it's reviewed by everybody. So once a quarter, you have, okay, we have 15 SOPs, 15 table of contents points. We'll start with HR, then we'll go to marketing, then sales, then a few operations. But the head of the departments are the ones that delegated it to the people, and then they bring it up, and the whole leadership team reviews it and say, okay, stamp of approval, this is how we do things. Because oftentimes, SOPs cover many different functions, right? How do you hire somebody, or how do you get a contract? You have your marketing, you have your sales, you have your finance, you have your legal, if there's a contract, then it goes back for signature, and then there's execution of it, right? So there's so many different things that once you have that stamp of approval from all of the department heads, you're good to go. You have it documented, but take it step by step.
A CEO that I know and I work with right now, so I won't mention the industry or the size, they have a practice which is every member of the company, and there are about 8 of them, has to write an SOP each week. Doesn't matter about what process, but invariably what happens is that people write SOPs about what they're working on, because that's what they understand and what they need solved. And they have to do this, so they have to present it. And the CEO sees what did they choose to write about, and did an SOP exist, and if the one that's written is better than the old one, or some parts of the old one still need to be taken into consideration, or the old one was better actually, you go back and say, okay, thanks for writing this, but we had a better one and here's why. But that's a way to get everybody working in developing this next level of expertise.
And by the way, there are people with some of my teams actually are in a conundrum. They don't know how to do it. I refer somebody to help them actually just document it, right? From an outside perspective, they sit down and say, okay, how do you do this? And they work below, at the lower, mid-level, to really understand what the process is, and then they document it. They do 1 or 2, and then they know the format, the template, and then the rest of the company does it. So there are outside company people that can help. But it's an important component of actually making sure that you have that centers of knowledge on paper, so that it's not dependent on any key person. Important for transition.
Shall we wrap?
Yeah, please.
Thank you so much,
Take it.
all of you, for coming, and we really hope you got something valuable out of it.
And this is a series, so look out for when we do this
Yeah, so
again.
every quarter, I think we're gonna have one.
And the
And
next
then-
one will be Dan Lubick and Jonathan Garber, and
Sales
Dan is
and marketing.
Yep,
Sales and
sales and
marketing.
marketing.
Tip of the spear.
Jonathan, thank you for stepping in and doing this
Storyteller.
Yes.
for us.
And actually want to acknowledge Dan, John, yourself and I for starting this series, and it's gonna be transitioned to the rest of the team, but thank you for this first, and for all your support on this
Yeah.
first.
You guys were great. Thanks.
Awesome.